Breaking today, Invictus Games organisers delighted that one Meghan Markle didn't show up, remaining genuine charity project, the Invictus Games. But is it really a charity?
The bad headlines just keep on coming for Prince Harry with the bombshell news that a petition is gathering.
25 Invictus Vancouver and Whistler Games. The competitor count on the operating file.
To hear sounds anti-Meghan because she sucks. It also...
When the team behind one of the world's most respected veterans charities learned that Meghan Markle would not be attending, their reaction was not panic or concern, it was relief. And nowhere does that hit harder than at Prince Harry's Invictus Games Foundation, the charity he launched with the Ministry of Defense in 2014. That single reaction says more about the real state of Invictus than any polished statement ever could. Now look at the numbers. The last Invictus event cost $63.2 million and involved 543 competitors. That comes to about $118,000 for each person. By comparison, the U.S. Warrior Games, a similar program for wounded American service members, runs its full yearly operation on around $2 million. In the UK, Help for Heroes and the Royal British Legion both follow models where most of the money goes directly to the veterans they are meant to support. So where did the rest of the money go? That is what sponsors want to know. It is what governments want to know. Most of all, it is what the veterans themselves keep asking. These were 543 wounded and recovering service members from 23 countries. People who had lost limbs, lived through traumatic brain injuries and PTSD, gone through rehab at places like the Defense Medical Rehabilitation Center, and returned from experiences most people will never fully understand.
And that is part of the problem. And because they know whenever he's around, and if he's white...
They arrived in Vancouver for the Invictus Games, and at first glance, it looked just like the official message promised: uplifting, important, and focused on courage and sacrifice. But behind the scenes, people who were actually there were talking about something very different. After the Vancouver Games, reports said some competitors had paid for their own flights. Others were said to have covered their own hotel bills. Some service members reportedly paid for equipment and travel out of their own pockets just to attend a charity event that had spent $63.2 million to stage itself. Think about that for a second. Veterans were raising money simply to attend a charity created for them. At the same time, reports suggested that others tied to the event were traveling very differently. In his book, Betrayal, Tom Bauer describes the travel and hospitality around Harry and Meghan's public appearances in detail, including private jets, luxury hotels, and high-end arrangements. It painted a picture far removed from the lean, careful spending you would expect from an organization meant to protect every dollar for wounded service members. Reports that Meghan's wardrobe spending for public appearances was around $180,000 only pushed the debate further. Then there was the issue of time. Observers said Harry and Meghan's appearances at some Vancouver Games events were extremely short. A wave, a photo, a quick greeting with someone important, and then they were gone. These were events competitors had traveled thousands of miles to attend, sometimes using their own money. Yet witnesses said the patron and his wife were there for only minutes before the motorcade moved on.
Many wounded warriors do need a team.
Questions about the crowd kept coming up as well. At some events, volunteers were reportedly more numerous than the spectators. People who attended also said the camera work and broadcast shots sometimes made the venues look fuller and more energetic than they really were. According to those in the room, there was a clear gap between what viewers saw on screen and what was actually happening live. One critic, who had closely followed the organization, summed it up bluntly: people give money to support the men and women who serve their country, not to pay for designer clothes and luxury treatment. The foundation strongly defended itself. Its public message was clear: 92% of every pound raised goes to charitable activities. It said that figure shows the charity is being run properly and within official guidelines. But critics quickly challenged that claim. They pointed out that, in practice, the 92% includes things like event management, venue hire, broadcast production, travel and hotel costs for organizers, security, and the full operating cost of staging a major international event. Under charity rules, those expenses may count as charitable activity. But that does not automatically mean a veteran in Birmingham received a wheelchair, a recovering soldier in Sydney got brain injury rehabilitation, or a family in Toronto received the kind of direct help most donors believe they are funding. That is why groups like the Wounded Warrior Project and Fisher House Foundation in the United States are often used as comparisons. In those organizations, the connection between spending and direct support for veterans is easier to see. And that is exactly where the pressure on Invictus grows, in the gap between the 92% headline and the real path the money takes.
The bad headlines just keep on coming for Prince Harry with the bombshell news that a petition is gathering.
Once people stopped taking the headline number at face value and started asking what was really behind it, they turned to the accounts filed with the Charity Commission. What they found only made the situation look worse. A few months before the Birmingham Games, there was a one-year countdown event, the kind of occasion a charity uses to build excitement, attract media attention, and remind sponsors and the public that a major event is on the way. Meghan was expected to attend, but she pulled out just days before. Harry went alone, and when people backstage learned it would be only Harry, the reaction was not panic or pressure. According to insiders, it was quiet relief. One person involved with the organizing team explained it simply. When Harry comes by himself, the spotlight stays where it is supposed to be, on the veterans, not on the media storm that can follow a royal couple. That meant people could relax and let the event speak for itself. To Harry's credit, people who have worked with him often describe him as easy to handle, flexible, and genuinely engaged. They say he is willing to go where he is needed, change plans without complaint, spend time with athletes, and drop the formal tone. A Harry-only visit is described as practical and easy to manage. He arrives, connects with people, and seems sincere. Meghan, by contrast, is said to bring a very different level of operational demand. Reports describe extra security meetings, tighter schedules, and last-minute changes that affect the whole event plan. By several accounts, the two of them together create a much more complicated operation than Harry alone, not a simpler one. So on paper, Harry solo works better. The pressure drops. The veterans stay at the center. But then came the problem. Photos from Birmingham passed with little notice. There were no major front pages and no strong international media coverage.
Just using the Invictus Games as a tax write-off, and is he making money off the backs of veterans?
There was no burst of coverage to remind the public that one of the biggest veterans events of the coming decade was only 14 months away. The day passed with hardly any impact. Now compare that with the Wales family that same week. William and Catherine appeared at the Polo on Friday. Catherine was at Wimbledon on Saturday. Then the whole family, including the children, attended the final on Sunday. 3 appearances in 3 days, each one drawing real warmth, real excitement, and the kind of natural public response that no PR team can fake. The children are now old enough to bring their own energy too, giving the family a new and believable way to stay connected with the public. That is what strong royal visibility looks like, and Invictus no longer has that advantage. Inside Invictus, other names are said to be quietly coming up as better long-term patrons for what the games are meant to stand for. Princess Anne, Zara Tindall, and Mike Tindall are all seen as people with real military ties, straightforward public images, and far less distraction. The original plan for Birmingham reportedly included Meghan and the children. That family element could have brought warmth and the kind of attention that helps keep sponsors interested. But that is no longer part of the picture. And that is now the central problem. Organizers are genuinely relieved when Harry arrives without Meghan because it keeps the event simple and keeps the focus on the veterans. But Harry on his own no longer brings the level of attention the games need to survive, expand, and keep governments and major companies willing to fund them. The glamour has faded, and what remains is a very costly event with a major financial issue underneath it. Every year, the Invictus Games Foundation files its accounts with the UK Charity Commission. That is not optional, and it is not a symbolic act of openness. It is a legal requirement.
Meghan's still playing games with the press. Harry misses a very big Invictus event.
The 2024 filing was submitted late after the foundation received extra time to complete it. Once the figures became available, people began reviewing them closely, including observers familiar with how charities like Help for Heroes and the Royal British Legion present their finances. What they found did not match the public message. direct grants to veteran organizations, the money actually passed from the foundation to the groups and programs supporting former service members fell by 63% in just 1 year. According to the Charity Commission filings, this was not a minor change. It was not a small adjustment. The amount dropped from £534,973 to £200, £300. In the world of veterans' charities, that is not a detail anyone can brush aside. It points to a clear decision. What makes it even harder to defend is this. In the very same year those direct grants were cut by 63%, the foundation's income increased by 41%. A new executive role worth 6 figures was created and filled. Cash reserves climbed to £2.3 million. By its own accounts, the organization was bringing in much more money than the year before, while sending much less of it to veteran organizations. Both of those facts appear in the same accounts filed with the same regulator. Legal costs also rose sharply, jumping from £45,000 to £155,000, with no public explanation attached. That is not a small rise. It means legal spending more than tripled in 12 months without any public record explaining why or what it related to. Deferred income, money the foundation had received but had not yet counted as usable revenue, also surged. It went from £431,000 to £1,799 million, a fourfold increase in a single year.
Supported with Palace funding via the Royal Foundation, Palace staff, Palace logistics and Palace...
Critics say that kind of jump in deferred income, especially for a charity of this size and profile, raises serious questions about how the money is being managed and why the public has not been given a clear answer. Then came the entry that pushed the debate into an even more serious place. The accounts showed that an American for-profit company called Juns LLC received nearly £30,000. But the filing did not explain what work or services the company provided in return. In the next year's accounts, that same company received nothing at all. There was no explanation for the original payment, no explanation for why it disappeared, just a name, a figure, and silence. Another detail drew even more attention. The same filing listed 2 different company registration numbers, one on the front page and another on the balance sheet. Different numbers, same document. The foundation said it was simply an administrative mistake with no deeper meaning. Critics were not so quick to dismiss it. Whether it was an innocent error or something more serious, it became one more pressure point in a debate that had already moved far beyond goodwill. The foundation's public defense kept returning to the same claim. 92% of every pound supports charitable activities and the spending falls within Charity Commission rules. Technically, that may be a valid defense. But when those same accounts show direct grants to veteran groups falling by 63%, while cash reserves rise and new executive salaries appear, the 92% figure starts to sound less like an explanation and more like protection. And the money story does not stop there. The Vancouver Games were not funded only by charitable donations. A large share of the money came from public funds, meaning taxpayer money, channeled through government departments whose main job is to support military veterans.
And that is part of the problem. And because they know whenever he's around and if his wife...
The Canadian federal government put in $15 million through Veterans Affairs Canada. British Columbia added another $15 million through its Ministry of Tourism, Arts, and Sport. That means $30 million in public money given in the name of helping veterans was committed to one international event. The rest came from about 40 corporate sponsors and roughly $26 million in donations from ordinary people who believed they were supporting a worthwhile cause. The Vancouver bid was organized through the True Patriot Love Foundation, a Canadian group with strong links to veteran support, which gave the whole effort even more official credibility. Looking back, that makes the financial questions even more serious. This was a huge amount of money, and people are right to ask where it actually went. But the structure of the operation matters too. That public money did not go straight to the games. Instead, it was channeled through a separate body called the Vancouver Whistler Games Corporation, created specifically for the Vancouver event. That corporation then paid a licensing fee to the Invictus Games Foundation, the British charity that owns the Invictus name, brand, and intellectual property that make the event possible. And here's the key issue: the size of that licensing fee. The amount of money that moved from a Canadian taxpayer-funded corporation across the Atlantic into the accounts of a British charity was redacted. It was fully removed from public view. So anyone trying to trace how much public money may have left Canada and ended up in the Foundation's London accounts hits a wall. The documents show a blank space where one of the most important numbers should have been.
And that is part of the problem. And because they know whenever he's around and if he's white.
As soon as people noticed that missing figure, a new round of scrutiny began. The issue is simple. Governments provided $30 million in public money in the name of veterans. Some of that money then appears to have left Canada through a licensing deal. Yet the public is not allowed to know how much, and no one in authority has given a convincing reason for keeping that number hidden. Critics say the structure itself is the real problem, no matter what the exact amount was. Canadian taxpayer money, raised to support Canadian and international veterans, was used to pay a licensing fee to a British charity, and the size of that payment was kept out of public view. That setup is what keeps drawing people back. Australia adds another layer to the story. It has long been one of the Invictus Games' strongest supporters, with a deep military culture and a solid history of backing veteran programs. But at one point, the Australian federal government temporarily paused its funding, even while Harry and Meghan were actively promoting the Games and building public interest around the brand. The government later reversed that move. After backlash from veterans, the Veterans Affairs Minister announced another 3 years of federal support. The money returned, but critics have not forgotten the original pause. Governments do not suddenly stop funding veteran programs for no reason. A decision like that comes after discussion, review, and concern. In Australia's case, the public was never fully told what led to that pause in the first place. The funding came back. The official message moved on. But the original question was never properly answered. So now the picture is even harder to ignore. Two governments, $30 million in public money, and a funding structure that hides one of the most important numbers in the whole story.
Dodgy involvement from the disgraceful Duke. This is certainly something which...
Meanwhile, the corporate world was paying close attention, and it had already started reaching its own conclusions. As governments quietly reviewed their positions and financial concerns kept building, Harry returned to the UK. The Birmingham visit, the Children's Hospital, the countdown event, this was meant to create goodwill and fresh momentum for the Games. Instead, it turned into one of the most quietly revealing appearances he has made in years. At the Children's Hospital, Harry spent time with a 12-year-old boy named Alec Hill, a football fan with no interest in royal drama, Netflix stories, or court cases. They were simply talking about football. Alec said he supported Aston Villa, and Harry immediately replied, without prompting or caution, that his brother supports Aston Villa too. He then kept going, mentioning the Europa League and William's public reaction to the result, keeping his brother in the conversation far longer than any carefully managed public figure normally would. The issue is not football. The issue is the pattern. In a room full of sick children, during the one project where he still holds real credibility, Harry still brought the conversation back to the brother who has very publicly chosen to move on. People close to William describe his attitude in simple terms. He does not want to talk about Harry anymore. William has drawn a clear line. Harry, whenever the moment becomes personal or unguarded, seems to step right back across it. Then came the Highgrove visit. Harry returned to the UK, arrived without trouble, moved around without trouble, and left without trouble. There were no security failures, no visible threats, and nothing to support the picture of danger that has sat behind years of legal action, public complaints, and major headlines. The gap between that reality and everything Harry has publicly said about security in the UK was hard to miss.
These two are just trying too hard in so many ways.
The claim that his family cannot safely return to Britain did not go unnoticed. He came, he moved around, and nothing happened. That left a striking gap between what actually happened and the years of public, expensive, and highly aggressive legal arguments about his safety. Harry now seems to be holding two positions that do not fit together. He says the UK is unsafe, yet he visited without incident. He says he wants privacy, yet almost every public move leads to fresh controversy. He says he left to protect his family, yet each uneventful return weakens that argument further. The contrast with William and Catherine only makes this stand out more. Their children are now part of public life. George, Charlotte, and Louis are old enough to bring real warmth and young enough to represent the future. It feels like a natural new phase for the family, one with real energy and steady momentum. The Wales family is not trying to look relevant. They simply are. Harry and Meghan do not have the same advantage. The Sussex brand feels stuck. Their children remain out of sight. There is no visible next chapter, no clear sense of movement, no natural renewal of the story. What remains is a man who keeps bringing up his brother, a security case that looks weaker every time he returns to Britain without trouble, and a charity beneath it all that appears to be running short on time. Then came another important sign. Boeing did not renew its contract. That matters more than it may seem at first. Boeing is not the kind of sponsor drawn in by celebrity appeal or a feel-good headline. It is a company with long and serious ties to military aviation and defense communities around the world. Its people build the aircraft that many Invictus competitors once flew, serviced, or in some cases almost lost their lives in.
Invictus Games are now facing major pressure with sponsors, especially now that Boeing...
When a company with deep roots in military culture chooses to step away from a veterans charity, that is not a simple paperwork slip. It is a deliberate decision made after serious discussion. Boeing did it, and it was not the only one. At the Vancouver Games, 44 companies openly backed Invictus with their money, branding, and public support. For the 2027 Birmingham Games at the National Exhibition Centre, there are only 11 unnamed sponsors, together contributing about £4 million. That fall from 44 to 11 is not just a normal business shift or a leftover effect from the pandemic. It sends a clear message. Because corporate support has pulled back, the British taxpayer is now carrying most of the burden. The UK government has pledged up to £26 million for the Birmingham Games. That is a huge amount of public money for an event in a city that only came out of effective bankruptcy in February 2025, after entering financial administration in September 2023. Birmingham had been struggling for years to meet its basic duties to residents, so this cannot be brushed aside as an unimportant detail, and the reason is no longer being hinted at quietly. People inside the events industry are now saying it openly. Major UK companies do not want to be publicly linked to Prince Harry. Reports also say that experienced event professionals, exactly the kind of people needed to run something this large, were refusing job offers from the Birmingham organizing team after learning the full scope of the role.
And that is part of the problem. And because they know whenever he's around and if his wife...
And when people learned the role was tied to Invictus, they were not pushing for better terms or asking for higher pay. They were simply leaving. The damage to the brand was said to be a real and ongoing problem when trying to hire senior staff. At the same time, a petition calling for Harry to be fully removed from the Invictus Games has continued to gather support. The people behind it are careful in how they explain their view. They say this is not an attack on the Games, not an attack on veterans, and not a wider statement about the royal family. Their point is straightforward. Harry's ongoing role is hurting the very organization he founded, and the veterans it was created for deserve better. No senior members of the royal family are expected to attend the Birmingham Games. That means no King Charles, no Prince William, and no Princess Catherine. This is striking because Invictus was once seen, even by Harry's strongest critics, as his most credible and widely respected achievement. It was the one project that seemed meaningful and stood above the surrounding drama. But now, even the family whose name and history helped give the charity its original weight and trust is not expected to be there. Sir Keith Mills, who worked with Harry in the Ministry of Defense in the early days, helped build Invictus into something that was meant to endure. The issue now is whether that institution can outlast the problems created by its own patron. That is why the image described in Tom Bauer's betrayal keeps coming back. One team needed wheelchairs. The other did not. When the match ended, the American players stood up, got out of their chairs, and walked off the court. Reports said hardly anyone in the audience was there to see it. What was supposed to be a powerful picture of courage and resilience is now, for critics, a symbol of something very different.
Adversely affected by the ongoing toxic and poisonous personal saga of Harry and Meghan. It would be a tragedy.
It highlighted the growing gap between what Invictus says it stands for and what it now seems to deliver. Support has fallen from 44 sponsors to just 11. Public funding has climbed to £26 million. The host city has only just come through bankruptcy. Senior royals are staying away. Skilled professionals do not want to join the project. A petition calling for Harry's removal is gaining momentum. And at the center of it all is Harry, now facing an even more serious problem in a London courtroom. The case Harry brought against the Metropolitan Police was always likely to become the most important legal fight of his post-royal life. More important than the phone hacking case. More important than the debate over his visa application. This one mattered most because it rested on a much bigger claim, that the British state had failed him, had deliberately taken away his security, and had put his life in danger. If that argument had succeeded, it could have reshaped the entire Sussex narrative. It did not succeed. The judge ruled against Harry on the main issue. The decision made by the Executive Committee for the Protection of Royalty and Public Figures, the group responsible for deciding his security arrangements, was found to be lawful, not barely lawful. Not legally acceptable despite obvious faults. Lawful, full stop. The ruling said the process had been handled properly and that the final decision was reasoned and valid. Harry's lawyers had argued that the decision was unlawful, irrational, and influenced by factors beyond a genuine security assessment. The court rejected that argument clearly and completely. Harry's own evidence did not appear to help his case. Reports said even his barrister had to distance himself from some of Harry's remarks under cross-examination because they went beyond the legal case his team was trying to make.
His obsession, his vendetta against the press. He's now gone over to London, he's lost this, and he's now potentially...
Observers inside and outside the courtroom noticed the same pattern. Harry often leaned toward the most dramatic version of events, at moments when a more careful witness would have held back. People in the room described someone who had spent years shaping a very clear story about himself as the victim, and who seemed to struggle when that story was tested under formal cross-examination. But the legal loss was only part of the picture. The other part came from what was revealed during the case. Documents disclosed in this lawsuit, along with material from the wider phone hacking cases, laid out in detail how deeply Harry and others had been targeted by the tabloids. On that narrower point, Harry was right. The intrusion was real, and the scale of it shocked many people who followed the evidence closely. Even people who had brushed off his complaints as attention-seeking were faced with records showing serious, repeated wrongdoing by major British media groups. A Murdoch deposition in a separate but related case added even more weight. The wider picture that emerged, of editors and executives who knew, or should have known, what was happening inside their organizations, was deeply damaging and reached far beyond Harry alone. That leaves a more complicated conclusion than either side may want. Harry lost the argument that mattered most to his personal story. The removal of his security was lawful. The state did not target him. The central claim that fueled so much of the anger, the documentary, the memoir, and years of public attacks on Britain and the royal system, did not survive legal scrutiny. At the same time, the evidence of media wrongdoing was genuine. And that puts Harry in the worst possible position. He is not a martyr fully proved right, and he is not simply a man making things up. He is something much harder for the public to absorb. A man with real complaints who handled them in the most destructive way possible, damaging every relationship and institution around him, and creating so little public goodwill that even his valid grievances now struggle to connect.
I never thought I would see the day that Prince Azza and Megxi would abandon the Invictus Games events here in the...
According to several sources, Charles is still deeply hurt. Not in public. Not in a way that creates headlines or starts another fight, but in private. Those close to the king say every attempt to repair the relationship has come from his side, and each time he has shown goodwill, the result has been familiar. A book, a documentary, a court case, or a new round of claims in the press. What makes it more painful is that both sides carry part of the truth. Harry was genuinely wronged in some ways. Charles, despite everything, has kept the door open. But the distance between them now feels less like a passing family rift and more like something lasting. If you step back, the same pattern shows up again and again. Arkewell, the Netflix deal, the Spotify deal, which ended early, quietly, and without delivering the content it was meant to produce. The memoir that smashed sales records while destroying personal ties. The security case. And now Invictus, the one project that was supposed to rise above all of this. The one that was never meant to center on Harry himself. It was supposed to stand for something bigger than personal complaints or business deals. And yet the pattern keeps repeating. Big ambition, major backing, huge attention at the start, and then a slow, visible breakdown that no one inside seems able to stop. That is not because the original idea was flawed. The Invictus Games is a strong and meaningful idea. It gives wounded veterans an international stage. It shows that recovery is possible after PTSD, brain injury, and the physical and emotional damage of war. It reminds people that sacrifice matters and deserves respect. That idea does not need to be sold. Its value is obvious. The real question is no longer whether Invictus is worthwhile. The question is whether the way it is being run and the man at the center of it are helping it succeed or pushing it further off course.
Now, the only issue with that is I didn't see a damn thing about Harry even being with veterans. I think we saw him playing pickleball.
Support has fallen from 44 sponsors to just 11. Grants to veteran groups have been cut by 63% even as reserves keep rising. There is also a hidden licensing fee that no one in authority seems willing to clearly explain. Birmingham, a city only recently out of bankruptcy, is now taking on a £26 million cost. Staff are turning down roles. A petition is growing. Senior royals are staying away. And every time people look closely at the finances, the same conclusion keeps appearing. The games are being kept afloat by public money because private backers have chosen to spend elsewhere. The veterans competing in Birmingham next year will be no less real than those who competed in Vancouver, Sydney, or The Hague. Their injuries will be real. Their strength will be real. Nothing about the costly, controversial system around the games changes what those athletes do on the track, in the pool, or on the court. But they deserve an institution that truly works in their favor. They deserve direct grants that increase, not shrink. They deserve an organization whose public financial records can be understood without a deep investigation. They deserve a patron whose presence attracts support, not one whose involvement has become the biggest obstacle to winning it. And they deserve a clear answer to the question that started all of this. With $63.2 million spent, 543 competitors, and a similar program running on just $2 million a year, where did the rest of the money go? That question still has not been answered in a full, direct, and publicly verifiable way. The 92% figure keeps getting repeated. Charity Commission guidelines keep getting quoted. Press releases keep talking about impact, inspiration, and the power of sport. But veterans are still asking. Sponsors have already given their answer by walking away, and governments, at least some of them, are still making up their minds. If you believe veterans deserve answers, not spin, then don't let the story fade. Share this video, join the conversation in the comments, and make it clear that support for wounded servicemen and women should never be buried under silence, weak accountability, or unanswered questions. And if you want more clear, honest breakdowns like this, subscribe and stay with us.